are my reviews, because that would work really well right now. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Bean here, and today I'm coming at you with my most recent reads. I managed to read 9 books over the month of August. I did do a miniature readathon where I did read 3 books in one weekend, so I'm pretty proud of that. And otherwise, I got through a couple of the review books that I've been meaning to get to for a long time, and I read some new ones that I kind of just randomly picked up. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. So the first book that I read was a relatively new release, and that is The Game by Lindsay Miller. You can see I marked a couple passages. These are both mostly just like favorite quotes. So this is a book that I actually bought myself this year. I really love Lindsay Miller's writing. She has this style of writing that I have absolutely fallen in love with, and she writes some very diverse characters that I completely enjoy. This book follows our main character, Leah, who is a senior in high school, and she's struggling with a bunch of different things at the time. The most prevalent one being the fact that she doesn't feel as if her parents care about her at all. And so she ends up delving deep into this senior tradition of sorts that is kind of a senior game. So at the beginning of the year, an unknown person sends out a mass text to everybody who signs up to play this game. And the game is a version of Assassin. And so what basically this means is that each student is assigned a team, and they are assigned a person that they need to kill or assassinate. So it's another person in the senior class, and there are some rules, and everybody follows them, and if you break a rule, you are automatically kicked out of the game. And it's something that Leah has been looking forward to her entire high school career. Back when her brother played it, he had graduated a couple years before her. She basically wrote down everything he mentioned about the game and has been strategizing for it since then. But suddenly, the people that are being assigned to her and her team are ending up actually dead. And suddenly, Leah's trying to figure out if it has something to do with this game and if it's something that she can prevent. And so her and her friends end up delving deep into trying to figure out why people are dying while they are playing this imaginary game. I ended up giving this book a 3.5, and I'm going to tell you why here. First off, trigger warnings. There are a bunch. Violence, death, murder, gore, and stalking as well. There is a stalking aspect to this book that's a little creepy and a little unwarranted. But I think the main thing that bothered me about this book was the synopsis. This synopsis gave away the book. Honestly, I wasn't even surprised when it came to the review, which was really disappointing. And this isn't a long book, so it's not hard to give away what happens in this book. I did my best not to say anything else. The synopsis literally gives away one of the big reveals of this story, and it really put a damper on that moment for me. I was very underwhelmed when it was revealed and kind of disappointed in all honesty, which was not fun. That being said, one of the things that I always really like about Lindsay Miller's writing is that she adds diverse characters in and she makes it normal. For instance, our main character, Leah, has anxiety, and she actually has a panic attack at one point in this story, and it is so well done. I really have nothing to say bad about it, or no criticism for it, which is saying something when it comes to mental health. I'm a big advocate for mental health. And the second character that really stuck out to me, actually the one that stuck out to me more, was Jem, her best friend, who is our non-binary character in this story. Yeah, this tiny little story made a non-binary character and had them make sense. Like, the entire town, the entire school is just like, yeah, that's cool, they're them. Cool, whatever, and they moved on. The only time that it was addressed, and I think it was addressed very well, it was addressed by one of the high school. These kids are all in high school, so it was addressed by one of the other students, and that student made a comment to Jem saying, well, you could get in college simply by playing the diversity card, and Jem goes, that's not what I want to do, and basically shuts down that person, and the person steps back and apologizes, and they all move on. I wish the real world was like that. That would be great. I did give this book a 3.5, basically because I wasn't surprised by the plot and it really didn't feel like a thriller or mystery to me. But because of everything in it, I really wanted to rate it higher. But in case you can't tell, I really did enjoy this book. And I probably will read it again. But I do recommend it. Okay, I'm going to move on to another book now because I spent so much time just going on about this book. So the next two books I'm going to read, I'm actually going to talk about together, and it's because they are the two books in a duology comic book series, and that is Ladykiller Volume 1 and Ladykiller Volume 2. Now, the first one is by Joëlle James and Jamie S. Rich, and the second one is by Joëlle James and Michelle Madsen. Now, this series, this duology, follows our main character, Gretchen, who is this woman right here. This series takes place in the 1940s, 1950s era, I believe, and it follows a housewife who doubles as an assassin on the side, but her family doesn't know that she's an assassin, and it's all about how she's able to be this perfect wife for her husband, but also on the side goes and kills the people who she is told to, and how that relationship kind of develops. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5. It was a little bit predictable, and I wasn't too blown away by anything, except for this art. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. So, yeah, very, like, it's very much that style of that era, so yes. Now, the second volume, this one took a different turn. So this one I ended up giving 5 out of 5 because I absolutely loved how this portrayed her and her relationships with everybody. I would recommend this. There is so much blood, guts, gore, there's assault, there's mentions of rape, there's all sorts of stuff. Like, it's an assassin book, guys. Come on, like, they show her stabbing people. So it's kind of, watch your trigger warnings here, but it was so well done. I truly enjoyed it. The next book that I read was actually an audiobook that I listened to, and that is The Night Swim by Megan Goldin. This is a relatively new release. It came out at the beginning of August, and I actually had this as one of my first audiobooks that I got from NetGalley. So thank you to NetGalley for this book, and actually a couple others that I have here as well. Video not sponsored at all, although that would be sweet. But basically, this story follows Rachel Kane, who is a podcaster who does a crime podcast where she goes into the courtroom and then she talks about what happens. She basically writes down everything that happens, and her podcast has basically hit the top of the charts. Everyone absolutely loves it. So for her second season, I believe it is, they decide that they're going to follow a rape trial. And now this just brings up all sorts of controversy. This book was so intense. It really did get to me at points, and I know that this is going to have severe trigger warnings for a lot of people. And I'm going to include those trigger warnings as rape, assault, insults, it's attempted murder, and it's so intense. It's a hard-hitting one, guys. It really is. This story actually takes place in 2 different time periods. One is in the present day during this rape trial, and the second one is actually recorded in a series of letters that are left for Rachel by one of her fans. Now, this fan, her sister was the victim of another rape/homicide back 20 years ago, I want to say it was, something like that. And so it was the talk of the town for a while, and then everybody forgot about her. And so this girl is trying to bring back this trial and trying to get people to talk about it again and get people to acknowledge the fact that her sister was not given a trial at all. They just assumed, and everybody moved on. We have many books out there that talk about rape, but very few of them go into an actual trial. And talking about rape and rape trials is something that is so taboo in our culture, and this book really addresses that, and it shows the nitty-gritty details of what each family goes through. Not just the family, but how it affects the town. And so this book is hard-hitting. This book took me a while to read because I kept having to put it down because was so much to listen to at one point. I am glad that I listened to it because I was able to listen to the podcast, the courtroom, and then to the letters, all in different voices. And so that was quite nice to have. And so I highly recommend this book. I really think that people should read it. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5. I think the only reason I didn't give it a full 5 out of 5 was because it was advertised as a thriller to me. And if I'm looking for the thriller aspect, I would have to say it would be the last, like, probably hour of the audiobook. So it wasn't much of the book at all. It was maybe the last probably 50 pages that were actually any sort of thrillery. So that is the only reason it didn't get 5 out of 5 from me, but highly recommend. Go read it, guys. It's hard-hitting, it's important, and it needs to be read. The next book that I started listening to was another audiobook, and this one was Milltown, Reckoning with What Remains by Kerri Arsenault. I didn't finish this book. I DNF'd it at about 10% in, and the reason I DNF'd it was just because I was not enjoying listening to it. If I had sat down and read it, it might have been different, but since I was reviewing an audiobook, I could not get into this book. I didn't enjoy listening to the narrator. It felt very monotone. It felt very... I couldn't find... I had to keep rewinding to try and focus on this book, and it just wasn't happening, so decided to move on, and I didn't end up finishing it. The next book I'm going to talk to is another book that I originally got as an ebook and then never read because I'm trash, and it is Swipe Right for Murder by Derek Milman. Now, this is a library book, in case you can't tell with the shiny cover, but this is a YA thriller, and oh my gosh, was this a YA thriller. This is the one that I have been looking for, and I loved it. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. The only reason is because the first half was very bouncy, and it took me a little bit to catch on to what was really going on, but the second half, oh my gosh, it was so intense. And I will say basically everything that could happen in this book happened in this book. So, in summary, this book follows Adrian, who is a senior in high school, and he is off in New York City visiting some friends of his as they all prepare to go to college the next year. Now, Adrian is 100% gay, and he is actually on a gay hookup app, basically. It's kind of like the book's version of Tinder, I guess. I'm not sure about that one. But basically, he ends up hooking up with this guy, and then while he is sleeping in the room, the guy is murdered, shot through the head, through the wall by an assault rifle. Like, honestly, it doesn't get much more thrillery than that. And so all of a sudden, Adrian has this mistaken identity. He gets a call on the dead man's cell phone, and they're trying to talk to him. And they're like, all right, we know you have this information. And he's like, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. And he ends up having to go on the run because all of a sudden, people are looking for him, and they're trying to kill him. And he's just like, what is going on? I'm so confused. And it was so well done. It was so good. Honestly, this book had great storylines. It actually had some very interesting things when it talks about family and a found family versus an actual blood family. But it's also about him trying to figure out who he is and what he wants to do with his life, and coming out to say that it's okay to not know what you're doing, but probably shouldn't try and get shot by everybody you see. So I will say there are trigger warnings in this book for assault, for murder, for drug use, for alcohol consumption. Yes, there are drugs and alcohol in this book as well. And for basically, how can I say this? I'm going to say this might be a slight spoiler, so if you don't want it, mute until my hand goes away. Basically, the FBI is a bunch of assholes in this book. They just like to use people, and it's absolutely terrible. So, okay, I'm done now. You can listen now, so we're good. But yeah, so overall, this got a 4.5 out of 5 from me, and I probably will actually pick up a physical copy of this book because I want to keep it on my shelves because I think I'll read it again. So there. Every month, there's at least one book that it just makes me sad. Like, it makes me unhappy that I read it. And unfortunately, this month had one. And that book was Escaping from Houdini by Kerri Maniscalco. I love Kerri Maniscalco, don't get me wrong. This third book seemed absolutely pointless to me. I disliked what happened. I didn't like the plot. I didn't like the characters in this book. Like, their actions, it didn't really seem like them. It seemed very, we want to create drama, so let's create drama. And I'm honestly just going to pretend that this book didn't happen. I gave this a 1.5 out of 5 because I did finish it, and I only give things a 1 if I DNF'd it. So, yeah. I don't really want to talk about this book because I didn't enjoy it, but I am planning on reading the fourth one in this series because I have heard that that book is probably the best one in the series, and since I loved the first one so much, I don't want to leave on this note. I just can't do that to these characters. I can't do this to the author, and I can't do this to myself. So, I am ignoring this book. I understand that some people absolutely love it. That's cool. I did not. I did not enjoy this book. So, we're going to move on now. And the next book that I read was also another library book, and one that I just picked up basically on a whim because I needed something that I thought I would enjoy. And I picked up the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I have read one other Grady Hendrix book, and that was Horror Store, which I believe is being made into a TV show or a movie. So I'm very excited about that. But this book surprised me. It surprised me so much. I did not think that I would enjoy this. And I gave it a 5 out of 5. I will say, I think it helped that the first half of it, I did listen to an audiobook of it. And then once it started moving faster, then I sat down and I actually read it. So I did end up reading this book in basically 1.5 sittings. It took me less than 24 hours to read this book, and I loved it. This is a vampire story that I loved. This book follows a woman named Patricia, who is a Southern mother and wife. This book follows a group of ladies who get together every week for a book club. And in this book club, instead of reading like the Bible or any of these classic books, they read murder stories. And not just murder stories, but they read books like Helter Skelter. So actual, like, real murders. So real killers and not fake ones. So I thought that was kind of a unique stance right there because I definitely read those books. Thank you very much. But as they do this, as they are going through this book club, a new neighbor moves in next to Patricia, and there's something off about him. There's something not quite right, and Patricia decides that she thinks he might be a vampire, and the story just goes from there. And it got intense, and it was interesting because in the beginning, if you have to read the author's note, the prologue, because it is great, and the last sentence of the prologue is, I wanted to set my mother against a vampire and see what happens. And believe me, it is not a fair fight. And I absolutely loved it. That's all I needed to hear because it's true. These women, you don't mess with them. You really don't. And it is amazing at what happens in this story. I cannot recommend this enough. It made me smile. It made me laugh. It made me gasp. It made me almost cry. Not quite. I didn't quite cry in this one. But I highly recommend this, and I did give it a 5 out of 5. Maybe it deserves a 4.5, but I gave it a 5 out of 5. All right. 2 books left, and the last 2 books that I read were actually nonfiction books. The first book I read, I actually read 1 for interest and 2 as part of research for something, and that is HausMagic, Transform Your Home with Witchcraft by Erica Feldmann. Now, this one I gave a 5 out of 5 because it was a nonfiction. I actually did learn a bit from it, but this book talks about modern day witchcraft and how it can be infused into a home. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not going to talk about it much here because it is exactly what the title says. It talks about different aspects of magic and different aspects of using crystals, using herbs, using teas, just kind of spiritual stuff. So I thought that was kind of fun, and it was interesting. I did learn a bit about how minds work and that, so I thought that was really quite fun, and I might continue reading some of these books because I think they're interesting. The last book that I read this month was Unf Your Habitat, You're Better Than Your Mess by Rachel Hoffman. I listened to the audiobook of this, and while I listened to the audiobook of this, I cleaned. And you know what? I got a lot done. And my house was a lot cleaner by the time I was done. And I have definitely learned several things, and am now using several aspects that I learned from this book in my daily life. So I would call that a successful read and a very helpful book. So highly recommend, 5 out of 5 again. And that's it. That's what I got for you guys here today. I'm in my huge sweater because I think it's fall now. It's not. But I love autumn feel. I am basic like that. I have no regrets there. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys here today. I hope you enjoyed this video and the 9 books that I read in the past month. And if you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up and please hit that subscribe button down below. We post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And if you want to be reminded when we post these videos, hit the little bell icon down in the corner. Now, all of our information, all of our contact information can be found in the description, and please leave a comment. We'd love to talk to you guys. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys here today. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep reading. Bye!